this bread and drink of this cup, you proclaim my death, confess my resurrection, and remember me till I come. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In the readings of the Church, the last 2 weeks in the Coptic year are reserved for the study of the last things, what theologian name eschatology, politics eschatology, the study of things that will happen at the end of time. So the Church actually this week, and maybe next week is the 5th week, so we're going to read special reading for 5th week. But the Sunday after, we will have the similar passage from St. Matthew. As we finish the Coptic year, preparing for Nowruz, this is usually the end of the year. This is how we end the year, with looking at the final things, the prophecy. As the Bible gives us the book of Revelation, and book of Revelation is concerned with the final things. So if you follow the church cycle, the liturgical cycle, it will follow the Gospel, the New Testament. You start with preparation from the book of St. Luke, and then Christmas, and then you go through baptism of Christ, and you go through the fasting, the Lent, and then you run into the Holy Week, and then you have the resurrection, and then you have the ascension, and then you have Pentecost, and then you have the apostles, and you have St. Mary, and then we conclude with the end of times. This is how the cycle, every year we go through that. So this week and next week, the Church is teaching us, it's guiding us. The Church is guiding us like a mother. It says, bring everyone attention to the end of times. That's what we have to think about those 2 weeks. That's our course. We have to look at the end of times and think about it. So if I can get the iPad, I can go with you through certain things that we need to know. It's something first we start with is the Gospel. We need to know what Jesus said about the end of times. In this Gospel, this is a focus on Christ, and on Palm Sunday, after he finished going through the temple, cleaning it, and then the disciples said to him, look at the great stones, look at these buildings. They were very impressed, as if, like you go today to Washington, D.C. and see all these federal buildings, the Pentagon, the Congress, the Capitol, the White House. Only you see these buildings and you get impressed, the Lincoln Memorial. And then imagine Jesus going with them and saying, you see these buildings? And they said, yes, Lord. It's very impressive. It's actually the Temple of Herod was more impressive than anything in Washington, D.C. You see this building? And he said, yes, Lord, you see it. He said, there will be not a stone standing on top of another. He is making a prophecy which will come to happen 40 years after his ascension. But at the same time, sitting at the mountain of Olives, if you've been to the Holy Land, you would know what I'm talking about. When you sit at the mountain of Olives, what are you seeing? What fills the scene in front of you? Jerusalem and the temple. So he's sitting there looking at the temple, looking at the city, and the disciples are asking him, you spoke something it got us very worried. You made us anxious. When it's going to happen? They started talking about the end of times. He spoke about the 2 events. One, the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And in the same chapter, he spoke about the end of the world, as we know. So when you go through this Gospel, he kind of mixed the two, about the end of Jerusalem and the end of the world. To them, it really doesn't matter. Jerusalem was the world to them. So if Jerusalem ends, the world ended. So they said this. As he sat on the mountain of Olives, looking over Jerusalem, opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, away from the 12, tell us, when will these things be? They got worried. And what will be the sign when all these things will be fulfilled? And he started listing things. He said, don't let anybody deceive you. And this is my beginning of this, is there will be deception and deceivers. And today you hear a lot of those prophecy gurus. You hear them on the news, you hear them in their churches speaking, people coming out and say, oh, this is sign of the end, this is sign of the end. Jesus, don't listen to that stuff. For many will come in my name saying, I'm he, or will be false prophets, deceive many. But when you hear, now he's going to talk about the signs. Wars and rumors of wars, do not be troubled, for such things must happen. But the end is not yet. That's when people started to be very alarmed with World War II especially. In the times, history tells people were thinking, this is the end, this is it. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be earthquakes in various places, and there will be famines. So, wars, earthquakes, famine, and troubles. These are the beginning of sorrows. This is not the end. But watch out for yourselves, for they will deliver you up to councils. He speaks about persecution. It's going on. Persecution is all the time. And you will be beaten in the synagogues. You will be brought before rulers and kings for my sake, for the testimony to them. And the gospel must first be preached to all the nations. That's something the whole New Testament speaks about. The end will come after the good news. The gospel is given to every nation on earth. Not everybody believes that the gospel reaches them. There's a difference. I was talking to the servants about being goal-oriented. God is not that way. And we as servants and Christians should not be goal-oriented. You should be God's will-oriented. You do the work of God, and that's it. The gospel has to be delivered everywhere. And we see that in our generation through the media, the internet specifically. The gospel is preached everywhere. You hear about people from Saudi Arabia converting, from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Indonesia. How did the gospel reach those people? Nobody's allowed to enter these countries with the gospel, most of them. And then he's saying, don't worry about what you say when you are persecuted. Then he's describing the current, the status or the affairs of people. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and the children will rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. What kind of culture this is? What is the culture of people turning against their own family members? What culture is that? So this is something the Old Testament and the New Testament, the last verse in the New Testament, the Old Testament was actually of the same mind. When you go to the very last verse in the Hebrew Old Testament, it speaks about this status of affairs. And it is Malachi. Malachi, the 4th chapter at the very end. What does it say? He said, behold, I will send you Elijah, the prophet. God is saying to his people, I'll send you Elijah before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Elijah must come. What would Elijah do? Listen to this. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers. What does that mean? Why would we need Elijah to come? To bring the hearts of the father to care for their children, and the hearts of the children to love their fathers. What's implied? What's between the lines? For God to send a prophet that he's been saving alive for a long time means it's evil times. Times that cannot be compared to any other time, when people are turning very selfish and unloving and disrespecting to parents, disrespecting to any kind of authority. And they are only caring for themselves. They worship themselves. That's it. That's what we see today. St. Paul said the same thing. And I want to read you also what I don't know. I don't want you to sit here listening to me. St. Paul said to Timothy, know this for sure. The end of times will come people, lovers of themselves, lovers of money, not honoring parents, deceptive, liars, you name it. So all the things that is disgusting in the gospel, the end of times will be showing to us. So what is that? That's one of the biggest signs of the end. There's cosmic signs. As we talk about this in the book of Revelation too, Jesus said there will be the 4 things that he talked about: wars and rumors of wars, famines, plagues, earthquakes, those 4 things. But it seems like this is not the end. It's something cyclical that keeps coming and coming, but the end one will be the biggest. He says the last earthquake that we will hear about will not be an earthquake. It will be heaven quake. He will shake the heaven. That's before coming of Christ immediately. But let me just say one thing, and that's very important. He says, St. Paul said this in 2 Thessalonians. He said, this is not going to happen before 2 major things that has to happen. One, the great apostasy, the great falling out. And then after that comes the Antichrist. What's the great falling out or apostasy? This comes as the cycles of war, famine, earthquakes, and plagues are turning over and over again. What's the falling out? What's the great apostasy? You know what? Anybody knows what the apostasy means? The apostasy, the word, is rejecting faith. When people are starting to say, we're talking about Christians, churchgoers, who will stop believing, stop practicing, stop being a Christian, and they will reject that faith completely and be as any secular atheist who had never been exposed to the life of God. How does that happen? And I want to just stop there. Because this apostasy has to happen first for the Antichrist to be shown, and the Antichrist will create that persecution against the church. So how does apostasy happen? Let me just understand this. This is simple. Jesus' goal to come to the world is to give us the Holy Spirit. To give us the Holy Spirit. And as smart as we are, we don't know what the Holy Spirit is doing for us. Almost all of us are oblivious. You might listen to a Pentecostal person or a preacher, and that's all you hear about it. But no, the Holy Spirit, today we baptized the two babies, and they were anointed with wine. They both have the Holy Spirit in them today. They received that gift, this light inside of them. But do you know do you perceive the work of the Holy Spirit in you? The first thing that should happen before the apostasy is the Christian loses touch with the Holy Spirit. Because if Christ came to give us this antibiotic for sin and for selfishness and to bring us closer to Him and to the Father, and we don't get any experience of that, then what happens? We might as well just be anything. It doesn't matter really. So what does the Holy Spirit do in me? And then this is when the Holy Spirit is rejected and refused, we start the apostasy, we start the falling back, we start actually going out of faith. What does the Holy Spirit do? First, St. Paul says, actually, the work of the Holy Spirit since Pentecost is to guide us. Those who are led by the Spirit of God, they are, what's the key word here? Those who are led by the Spirit of God, they are children of God. Children of God. How can I call myself a child of God and I don't have the leading of the Holy Spirit? I don't know what the Holy Spirit does. Is there a Holy Spirit? Do I have anything? I don't feel anything, Abuna. What are you talking about? Very simple. There is very simple, I want to say, delicate work of the Holy Spirit inside of us. Problem is, we are vulgar, impatient, aggressive, selfish. I will never listen to that voice. Because that voice will call me to be humble, sacrificial, loving, caring, more like Christ. And I don't like that. And why I don't like it? Because I'm afraid I'll be taken advantage of. I cannot get the things that I want. So which spirit is leading me to get the things I want? The Holy Spirit? No. There's another spirit. Why would Jesus come to give us the Holy Spirit? Because the world was controlled by another spirit, the spirit of Antichrist, the spirit that is controlled, that is in the dominion of Satan. Satan is always telling us, come, eat from the tree. Come, make the stones into bread. Come, be famous. Come, be rich. Come, eat. Come, drink. Come, enjoy. When you hear enjoy, be very weary. Very weary. You're hearing something that is not godly. The world will never tell you, come and offer something, give something, love someone, go an extra mile. That's not the voice of. So the Holy Spirit inside of me is very gentle. I will tell you something. Don't expect the Spirit to be very aggressive, and because that's like, again, it's the nature, right? If the Spirit is aggressive, pulling me from my shirt, telling me, come, let's do this. What are you doing? Don't sleep, let's go to church. What do you think the Spirit will be like? The devil. God forbid. But it's always whispering. Spirit is whispering. You feel a very, very nice feeling inside your heart. Very gentle. Very gentle. And to listen to that voice, you must be a person who loves to be gentle, wants to be gentle. But if you don't want to be gentle, if you want the desires, you're not going to have anything to do with the Spirit. And this is the beginning of the apostasy, is the beginning of rejecting the voice of the Spirit, preferring the voice of the world. And those are children of God. I'm talking about people who are baptized, receiving communion. Apostasy is not for people outside the church. How can you call someone who's an atheist? He apostatized. If you say an atheist apostatized, what does that mean? He became a believer. But for apostasy to be apostasy, it has to be a believer who rejected the faith. And the first thing that happens, we reject, God forbid that anyone would be in this case, reject the gentle voice of love. The deep, gentle voice of love in our hearts invites us. I love this writer, she wrote about also the prayer thing. Saint Macarius from Egypt had said this. He said sometimes you come to prayer and say, I should pray loudly, I should read, and then we always go and think this is prayer, this is how it should be. And this writer said, no, and St. Macarius said the same thing. He said, don't make a rule for prayer. Sometimes that woman said in her writing, and I think she depended on the fathers in this, she just said, you're in a house with many windows, but different shapes. You have stained glass window, you have a bay window, you have a front window, you have a back window, you have an attic window, and then you have to listen carefully and see where the wind is rattling, where is the window is making noise, and in that window you should look to heaven. What she's saying is, don't make a rule and look from the same window. Sometimes the Holy Spirit is not meeting you there. So you have to pray and first feel in your heart, what do you want to do? You want to sing? Maybe the Holy Spirit is inviting you to sing. Can the Holy Spirit do that? Yes, absolutely. If you are familiar. Sometimes you sing, sometimes you read, sometimes you pray, sometimes you don't say anything and just sit with tears. Or just peaceful, be quiet there. The prayer of the heart. All these kinds of prayers are found in the Bible. You know, the first person to have a heart prayer without words? A famous person. Jesus prayed with her lips, no voice. Hannah, the mother of Samuel, they say this is the first person who showed us the prayer of the heart, because there were no voices. You look at somebody like David, he likes to sing with music. And sometimes he would say something very sad, sometimes he would say something beautiful. You look at somebody else like Peter, he would stand and pray on the roof at noontime. You look at sometimes the disciples used to go to the temple and pray the Agpeya, the Psalms. So all these different kinds of prayers are given to us, but you need to see where the Spirit is leading you to do. What is it about prayer? You're going to pray, but how I'm going to pray with the Spirit. I have heard things about prayer, it's really interesting and shocking. One person tells me, he calls me on the phone like at 6 o'clock in the morning, he said, Apuna, you will never believe what happened to me last night. I said, what happened? He said, I was asleep, I woke up and I was crying to God. I don't know what I was crying about, but I knew that I was talking to God with tears. I said, is anything wrong with you? He said, no, I was not sad. I was not sad. But all of a sudden I found myself getting up from sleep, looking to heaven, and I'm just crying. And what was, there were any words? I said, I couldn't perceive any words. That's something about people who deal with the Holy Spirit, who acknowledge the presence of the Holy Spirit and deal with the Holy Spirit and have the sensitivity to be really human, not to turn into that ugly, abolished humanity that the world is giving us. We are not humans if all what we care about is eating and drinking and enjoying material stuff. That's not human. Human is meant to have a relationship with God. Saint Irenaeus, I think he said, the glory of God is the life of man. The glory of God is the life of man. Man alive. And man cannot be alive without a life giver, the Holy Spirit. So this is, I think, the mark of the end of times, when the people started to reject the Holy Spirit. And St. Paul would call it the person that prevents from the Antichrist from coming. He's the antibiotic for the Antichrist. If we started rejecting the Holy Spirit and drifting away and becoming more and more physical, it's the best time for the Antichrist to come. And once the Antichrist comes, even the visible things of the church will be abolished. And this will be the call for Christ to come back. There will be nothing else to be done. No one can help that situation. When we reach that point, when the Antichrist is enthroned and he's ruling, the only person who can deal with him is Christ himself. And that's it. So we ask that it doesn't happen in our times. I ask God that, although it looks very close, by the way, you look around and you feel people are turning to be more and more selfish, more materialistic, more aggressive. I was thinking yesterday, I said, we're dealing with people around, I said, there's a big change in people after COVID. Are individualistic. They're just everybody to themselves. There's not much empathy. They don't feel the pains of someone else. You would see this more and more as time goes by. And then by doing this, we are separating ourselves. So we too react to this by distancing ourselves from the Holy Spirit, and we ignore Him completely. And by doing this, we give a space for the Antichrist to come. When the Antichrist comes, even the things that we know to exist in the church, coming us together like this today, will not happen. It will not be allowed. Hopefully not in our times. It's hard times, and Jesus today warned about it. He said it will be the hardest time from the beginning of creation to the end, and there will be nothing like it. So he said, it's because of the elect, whoever's going to be alive and surviving, God will shorten those days so they don't get lost. That's the talk about the end of times, as we gather a few pieces from here and there, not in details, of course. We ask God to protect the church, to protect the gift of the Holy Spirit in us, who is not known by the world does not know the Holy Spirit. And we ask Him to lighten our burdens and give us more abundance of the Spirit. To Him is the glory, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and forever.